Hello, everybody. This is Alexandru Mischie. I'm the chair of the work group on telecardiology from the International Society of Telemedicine and eHealth. So I have the pleasure to welcome you along with my guests to this excellent webinar, which is entitled Digital Solutions in Preventive Cardiology. We have online Dr. Adolfo Sparenberg, which is the co-chair of the Telecardiology Working Group. We also have Professor Grobbee, the past president of the EAPC, and we also have Dr. Piotrowicz from Poland, which will expose an excellent presentation on cardiac rehabilitation. I would like to welcome these two excellent speakers, and I'm looking forward to their lecture. So Dr. Ewa Piotrowicz is from Poland, and Dr. Grobbee is from the Netherlands. Furthermore, we are welcoming you to access our Telecardiology work group. We are focused on everything that concerns cardiology and remote cardiology. This is the webinar structure for today. So after having said a few words, I will let my colleague Dr. Sparenberg make a presentation of the International Society of Telemedicine and eHealth. Afterwards, Professor Grobbee will present briefly the European Association of Preventive Cardiology. Afterwards, he will continue with his presentation on digital solutions in preventive cardiology. And Dr. Piotrowicz will perform the second presentation. And we will end, of course, with questions from the audience and the take-home message. So without further ado, I will give the word to my colleague, Dr. Sparenberg, which will present you briefly the International Society for Telemedicine and eHealth. Adolfo.
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much, Dr. Alexandru. It's my pleasure. Dear invited speakers, colleagues, and affiliated members of the ISfTeH and the European Association of Preventive Cardiology. Well, on behalf of the ISfTeH, I welcome all of you to this webinar, and I would like just to say brief words and two messages. First of all, this session that is transmitted via any meeting webinars platform will be recorded, so the content of the slideshow and respective audio will be available to those colleagues that for some reason couldn't attend the live session today. And the link to the recorded session will be provided through the ISfTeH website. And also, during this webinar, a chat box is available on the left side of the screen. So your comments and questions, as informed by the moderator, Dr. Alexandru, are quite welcome. So at the end of the presentations, then your questions can be and comments included as part of the chat box. So it's my mission just to say some words about the International Society for Telemedicine. Our institution is a non-governmental institution and non-for-profit that is in official relations with the World Health Organization. And our society was founded in 1997, so 22 years ago, during a conference in Kobe, Japan. So the headquarters of our society is located in Basel, Switzerland, and the mission of the ISfTeH is mainly to facilitate the international dissemination of knowledge and experience in telemedicine and eHealth, and at the same time to provide access to recognized experts in the field worldwide. So the next slide, as you can see, the ISfTeH has affiliated members in all continents from over 100 countries and in different membership categories. Next Next slide. Okay. The society nowadays counts on the support of several working groups, like those that are described in this slide. The working groups are in fact a very important segment of the ISfTeH. So they are responsible for organizing practical activities throughout the year. You can see so many working groups described here. The society organizes annual international conference. This kind of international conference rotates around the world. So the next will be held in Takasaki, Japan, in early October in 2020, the next year. So since now, you are all invited to attend this outstanding conference in Japan in the next year. Well, also, the ISfTeH organizes an annual program of webinars, a very successful initiative that started several years ago, as you can see demonstrated in this slide. So this is in the same standard of today's webinar about telecardiology. So this is something very important for our society too. Well, those interested in joining the ISfTeH can affiliate through different membership categories. You are all welcome. Just visit the ISfTeH website and go directly to the How to Join area. It's really a quite easy process. Finally, this is the ISfTeH website for those interested. So thank you very much and wish all of you a very nice webinar on telecardiology. Thank you, Dr. Alexandru.
Thank you very much. It was Dr. Adolfo Sparenberg, board member of the ISfTeH and also vice chair of the Telecardiology Working Group. So further on, I will have the pleasure to invite Professor Grobbee. Professor Grobbee is the past president of the EAPC, the European Association of Preventive Cardiology. And he will present a few slides about this excellent association, which is a branch of the European Society of Cardiology. Professor Grobbee, you have the word.
Thank you, Alexandru. It's a pleasure to introduce the European Association of Preventive Cardiology, which is indeed one of the constituent bodies of the European Society of Cardiology with a special mission, and that is to promote excellence in research, practice, education, and policy in cardiovascular health, primary and secondary prevention. So very much focused on all forms of prevention through memberships, publications, educational programs, research, and a lot of tools that you can find on the website of the association. Of course, the association is built by its members. Members from the association come in various categories, from regular all the way to gold members, with varying benefits, but we love all of its members equally well. Overall, now more than 6,700 health professionals, cardiologists, and other allied physicians and allied health professionals are member of the association to together create the format and the deliverables of the association. Now, if you want to get more information, of course you can visit the website, but if you like more interactivity, we just opened a Facebook page, EAPC Preventive Cardiology, which is open to all. An important development that is currently being launched is the center accreditation. Center accreditation seeks to promote and monitor the quality of cardiovascular preventive care in centers across Europe in a uniform manner, to provide confidence in the quality of care, provide benchmarks, and works in 3 categories that can be taken separately or combined: cardiovascular risk management and prevention, secondary prevention and cardiac rehabilitation, and sports cardiology. Currently, we have a tryout phase. The details of application for accreditation can be found in a week or so on the website of the ESC and EAPC. And in the tryout phase, we have now successfully accredited 4 centers in 4 European countries. Finally, another conference also in 2020, the ESC Preventive Cardiology meeting, formerly known as EuroPrevent, a very lively meeting last April in Portugal with about 1,200 people attending. And we look forward to an equally successful meeting next year in Malaga. And all of you are wholeheartedly invited to that. Thanks, Alexandru.
Thank you very much, Professor Grobbee. So I think I should especially thank the EAPC for this excellent collaboration and for the fact that it agreed to have this joint webinar. To be mentioned that this is the first webinar where the European Society of Cardiology has a partnership with another society. So this feels really great, and I hope we will collaborate soon, if not on webinars, on other projects. Thank you very much. So once again, furthermore, Professor Grobbee will present us with his slides, notably digital solutions in preventive cardiology. Professor Grobbee, you have the word. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's obviously an almost impossible task to summarize in just 15 minutes or so the world of digital solutions in prevention. And even so, there is new and evolving technologies on a day-to-day basis. So a quick glance in some highlights of what's going on, but certainly a topic that requires to be revisited in the not too far future to be up to date. These are my disclosures. And this is the world map. What you see here is a conventional map where the size of the countries is based on their land area. This is what we are used to see. However, this map can be modified. For example, modified according to physicians per 100,000 people. And now the world looks entirely different. The physicians seem to be concentrated in the northern part of the world, notably Europe and the US. There's also quite a few physicians in India, but they tend to almost all reside in the bigger cities. So a large disparity in availability of physicians, let alone cardiologists or preventive cardiologists. And a similar picture when you look at public health. This is public health spending. Again, Northern Hemisphere is dominating. Lots being spent in Europe, lots being spent in the US, much less in the rest of the world. And we all know that the burden of cardiovascular disease currently is much more a burden of the southern hemisphere of the globe, where the epidemic sort of is on its return. In westernized societies. So this creates a problem. Lack of healthcare resources and staffs leaves millions at risk, undiagnosed and undertreated. And what we are looking for is disruptive technology that may provide solutions. And this disruptive technology is available. Technology that can complement manpower and can reduce the need for staff and can create a much bigger patient involvement. Thanks to the internet. This is a heat map of internet connected devices, and here you see lots of activities in large parts of the world, notably Europe and North America, but clearly also in Latin America, hotspots, even in Indonesia, in Australia, perhaps not quite as much in Africa yet, but Africa is on the increase. Here you see the share of the population in sub-Saharan Africa, some of the poorest areas of the world, with access to mobile phones, electricity, sanitation, financial services, and paved roads. And for better or worse, where there is lots to be done in these countries, mobile phone access is really rapidly increasing, even in far corners of the world. So this accessibility to the internet, accessibility of smart technology creates enormous opportunities, which are called digital health. And this is from a very recent paper from the ESC-EAPC Working Group. Overcoming challenges in digital health implementation in cardiovascular medicine appeared in Preventive Cardiology, defining digital health as the use of information and communication technologies to treat patients and convey healthy lifestyles, primary prevention, conduct research, educate healthcare professionals, track diseases, and monitor public health, I would like to emphasize that it also is a way of generating new knowledge and driving innovation. And these are some forms of digital health, as many of you are well aware of. E-learning, remote monitoring, that includes telemonitoring, structured telephone support, tele-rehabilitation, teleconsultation, mHealth apps, and of course, big data. And I'll speak briefly on some of these forms of digital health, and I end with some examples of what big data can do for us. Now, this is all very much upcoming and very promising as a means to improve prevention and other forms of cardiovascular care. And Eric Topol, well-known cardiologist in the US, said it in this way in a very interesting book entitled "The Patient Will See You Now." If we scale the telehealth system to its full potential, it will become the dominant way that outpatient medicine is rendered. And this will have consequences for physicians, cardiologists, and other physicians in the way they organize and also deliver their care. And of course, one well-known example of telemedicine and digital health is remote monitoring, a very appealing one. Now that most of us will have smartphones that can do all sorts of things that old phones could not do, connected to the internet, they can give information on health, on risk, to central service that can be looked into by physicians, and there is interactivity that may generate advices and support healthy lifestyles and other forms of prevention, including compliance to medication. And this is just a summary of the most promising applications of remote patient monitoring, prevention and lifestyle interventions, including coaching, chronic disease and risk management, hypertension, diabetes, heart failure, arrhythmia detection, tele-rehabilitation. And you will have a more extensive discussion of tele-rehabilitation in about 10 minutes. And this is just a summary of some of the sensors that we can use. We can measure a lot, from blood pressure to glucose, to heart rate and heart rate variability, and many more things to come. An example of how that could work, this is from an organization, I believe it was in Nepal, very few physicians, a major burden of hypertension. Now, hypertension can be detected and blood pressure monitored by case managers, for example, a nurse or a pharmacist. The information is then shared through a central server with a hypertension specialist and or primary care physicians and or other healthcare professionals who can sit at a long distance and still advise and monitor the patient. Now, what about the evidence that this works? The evidence that it works is somewhat lagging behind with the applications, and that is easy to understand because technology goes very fast, and generating evidence, for example, through cohort studies or RCTs, takes much more time. This is a publication from a few years ago where all RCTs and observational cohort studies on telehealth, telemedicine, web-based strategies, email, mobile phones, and so on and so forth, were included and analyzed for their impact on cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular disease risk factors. There were 51 studies that met the criteria for full text review and were included in the systematic review, with 9 studies analyzable cardiovascular disease outcome data. Of course, that's much harder to collect in the short term, particularly in low-risk patients. And that is shown in this slide. Here you see the results of the systematic review and meta-analysis for cardiovascular disease outcomes. For primary prevention, very few cases and not much to learn from that. However, in spite of limited numbers, for secondary prevention, already benefits that were significant across all studies were found. Similarly for heart failure and therefore also for the total. Now, cardiovascular disease outcome for prevention and primary prevention in particular is of course hard to detect, but you can look at risk factors, and the next slide shows you the effect of various modes of digital health on body weight, and here very clear benefits are shown in the primary preventive arena. All in all, significant and sizable reductions in body weight from telemedicine approaches that targeted that body weight. For secondary prevention, much less data, and overall, of course, the effect of primary prevention dominates. Now, when we look at the mode of telemedicine, here a distinction is made between web-based approaches, telemedicine-based, SMS services or email. And in fact, web-based telemedicine, SMS, they all seem to work. This is again the effect on body weight, but email is not very effective. And the reason for that is probably because email is not very interactive, and all the other modes are interactive. And the interactivity is one of the key benefits from digital health. Now, one thing that digital health does is also generating large numbers of data, so-called big data. And big data is transforming medicine, and this big data will also be transforming cardiology and preventive cardiology, because there's a lot we can learn. Big data that are, for example, generated by apps, by interactive web-based services, and so on and so forth, by sensors that are stored now. They are complementary to data from a range of sources. You can combine data from digital health, for example, with data from social networks or from all sorts of other registries or databases. The advantage, of course, of today is that we can now access the data because they are not stored on computers in offices, but they are stored in the cloud, and we do have high performance computers that are able to manage those enormous amounts of data. I'll just give a few examples, and this is Twitter, for example. Twitter is a potential data source for cardiovascular disease research. This particular paper looked at terms that were tweeted and noted that in the health area, most tweets that were made in the health area referred to chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, and cardiovascular disease risk factors, an important mode of communication, therefore. But you can go further. This is a paper from a few years back where psychological language on Twitter predicted county-level heart disease mortality in the US. So here you see a number of tweet terms that express hostility, aggression, hate or tension, boredom or fatigue. And if you take those tweets and you relate the occurrence of those tweets to the occurrence of heart disease, you see here the Twitter predicted acute heart disease mortality and the CDC reported acute heart disease mortality. And without further analytics, it's quite clear that the patterns are remarkably similar. So Twitter topics positively correlated with county level heart disease mortality. We also did a bit of an exercise and did this recently, starting from the view that fast food restaurants may be related to cardiovascular disease risk, because Western style fast food has been associated with increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Studies on fast food restaurant availability and fast food intake, however, have shown inconsistent results. So the availability of the fast food and limited numbers of studies on fast food restaurants have really looked at the effect on these restaurants' availability on individual risk of cardiovascular disease. And big data now allow us to do so. So what we did, we took the population register in the Netherlands. That's about 17 million people. And we took all of those that were older than 35 years, that were living stably at a certain address. We linked the data of those individuals to the hospital discharge register. That's digital health data. We linked it to tax information to be able to adjust for confounding by social economic status. And we linked that to hospital discharge and cause of death registers. Next, we took exposure, that is the distance that people were living from fast food restaurants. We had a map with GPS information on the Netherlands where we could map the fast food restaurant to each individual according to distance, that is 500, a kilometer, or 3 kilometers. And we were looking at whether people living closer to these fast food restaurants would exhibit higher rates of cardiovascular disease. And that was indeed true. So here you see the 500 meters network buffer, increased risk of coronary heart disease and heart failure within 500 meter distance, and even in urban areas, also associations with stroke occurrence. For a kilometer, there were associations with cardiovascular disease in terms of coronary heart disease. When people were living further away than about 3 kilometers, we could not find associations. And now I hear you thinking, yes, there's a lot of confounding, and indeed, you have to be very careful to look at these correlations and when you want to explain that causally. But nonetheless, it shows the power of data. Just connecting data from 17 million people in a very simple and feasible manner shows that there's a lot we can learn. a lot that we can learn about risk of cardiovascular disease and also hopefully modes of their prevention. So to sum up, because time is up, there will not be sufficient numbers of well-trained health professionals across the world in the foreseeable future. However, technological advances will create unprecedented scalable solutions to complement manpower. Preventive interventions are particularly well suited for digital approaches. The internet and smart access, of course, are key, but are increasingly accessible to millions, if not billions, of people. Awareness and empowerment promote individual prevention and lifestyle management. Digital coaching helps. We have seen empirical data to support that view. And interactivity is important. And finally, big data and big data analytics will catalyze the developments and fuel new innovations. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Professor Grobbee. So, as a joke, I should make sure that I'm at more than 3 kilometers from a fast food in order to have a better outcome.
Yes, better for you.
I would just have one question. We will reserve then the questions at the end of the both presentations. So, what do you think about artificial intelligence? Is there a role in preventive cardiology?
Well, artificial intelligence in itself is a very powerful tool to learn about patterns in data. So, for example, if you have behavioral data from individuals on a large scale, as for example recorded to social networks, or their shopping behavior and their medical data, if you want to make sense of those complex data, then one way of doing that is using AI or machine learning to find algorithms. It sounds simpler than it is because there's lots of issues there, but artificial intelligence allows us to supplement brain power in getting our way into big unstructured and structured data sets. And I think that this is going to help us enormously, not only in prevention, but also in other areas of medicine.
So I will further, there was a slight technical problem. I will further give the word to Dr. Eva Piotrowicz, which will talk about hybrid comprehensive telerehabilitation and telecare in heart failure patients. However, because I could not be heard before, I would like to thank once again Professor Grobbee for his excellent participation, and we hope to see him soon at another webinar or event. Thank you very much, Professor Grobbee. So furthermore, Dr. Eva Piotrowicz from Poland will have this excellent presentation on hybrid telerehabilitation. Thank you, Eva. You have the word.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It is great pleasure to be here. Dear colleagues, it is well known that according to the present guidelines, all stable heart failure patients should undergo exercise training. This is the first class of recommendation and the level of evidence A. Unfortunately, these guidelines are still poorly implemented in everyday clinical practice. As you can see, less than 20% of heart failure patients participate in a cardiac rehabilitation program, according to a European survey. These problems can be solved by introducing hybrid comprehensive telerehabilitation in heart failure patients. That is why the information of this new option of cardiac rehabilitation was included to recent guidelines and expert consensus statements. Let's start with definitions. Telerehabilitation is defined as a supervised remote comprehensive cardiac rehabilitation, and it includes the telecare and telesupervision of exercise training. The hybrid telerehabilitation program is initiated during an in-hospital stay, and later on, patients have to continue their remotely supervised tailoring exercise training at home over defined additional weeks, combined with a multi-parameter telemonitoring. Telemonitoring can be useful during this procedure as a tool to control stability of clinical status, telesupervised training sessions, so we can monitor training heart rate and perceived exertion according to the Borg scale. We can also control adherence to recommendations. Methods of remote monitoring vary from the simple telephone support to external devices or cardiovascular implantable electronic devices or hemodynamic implantable electronic devices. We can monitor symptoms, parameters, ECG, blood pressure, body weight, saturation, respiration, lab tests, and thanks to the home monitoring option of cardiovascular implantable electronic devices, we can also monitor mean heart rate over 24 hours and patient's activity, frequency of arrhythmias, heart rate variability, and also pacing impedance. Thanks to hemodynamic implantable electronic devices, we can monitor pulmonary artery pressure and left atrial pressure. The literature described the following forms of the monitoring. From the simplest like heart rate monitoring or transtelephonic electrocardiographic monitoring through the more advanced like tele-ECG monitoring and supervision exercise training using a remote device or real-time ECG and voice telephonic monitoring of cardiac rehabilitation. We can have also for our disposal telemonitoring physical activity using movement sensor, mobile application, and gaming systems in rehabilitation. I would like to show you some published data regarding telerehabilitation. This study comes from our center and was dedicated only to heart failure patients. 152 patients were randomized to telerehabilitation group or on-site telerehabilitations. Telerehabilitation was based on walking training, simple walking training, and on-site rehabilitation was based on psychoergometer training. As you can see, all telerehabilitation group patients completed the cardiac rehabilitation program, but dropout in on-site rehabilitation was about 20%. In both groups, cardiac rehabilitation resulted in a significant improvement of distance in 6-minute walk test, peak oxygen consumption, and quality of life. And there were no statistically significant differences between the groups regarding the improvement in exercise duration, peak oxygen consumption, and quality of life. This procedure also was safe. In our center, we have also experience in home-based telemonitored Nordic walking training. 111 patients were randomized in ratio 2:1 to training group or control group. And Nordic walking training resulted in significant improvement in peak oxygen consumption, 6-minute walking distance, and quality of life. We did not observe these favorable results in the control group. The differences between the training group and the control group were significant. And this procedure also was safe. In neither group were there death nor necessity for hospitalization. Moreover, this study showed that telerehabilitation positively affects the parasympathetic balance in heart failure patients, improve also physical capacity, and what is more important, the correlation between the change in peak oxygen consumption and the change in low to high frequency ratio was significant only in telerehabilitation group. We did not observe these favorable effects in a control group. What is very important, positive effects of the sympatho-parasympathetic balance obtained during the telerehabilitation results from the additive effects of the reversion of depression. So telerehabilitation also improved depression in heart failure patients. It is very important because, as we know, more than 50% of heart failure patients suffered from depression. And the objective of this meta-analysis was to determine whether the benefits of the exercise component of pulmonary and cardiac rehabilitation using telemonitoring are comparable to traditional rehabilitation programs. And this study showed that telerehabilitation for patients with cardiac conditions provided benefits similar to traditional rehabilitation with no adverse effects reported. Another study confirmed these results. Dr. Fang and colleagues demonstrated that telerehabilitation was not inferior to a hospital outpatient-based rehabilitation program in heart failure patients. Of course, every new technology and methodology, apart from having benefits, also has some limitations. This table lists the advantages and disadvantages of telerehabilitation. The most important advantages is ability to continue rehabilitation in case of problems with adhering to hospital-based program and ability to treat more patients. There are some limitations also. Missing face-to-face contacts with medical staff on another patients, and lack of reimbursement, lack of legal principles, lack of comprehensive telemedical systems. So let me conclude. I would like to conclude. Telemonitoring makes it possible to control the clinical status stability and to supervise exercise training sessions in heart failure patients undergoing rehabilitation at home. In consequence, exercise training at home is safe, effective, and acceptable for patients. This procedure improves adherence to recommendations and may be an alternative for comprehensive cardiac rehabilitation for heart failure patients. I would like to share with you our experience in terms of rehabilitation and show you a short movie about how to do hybrid comprehensive telerehabilitation and telecare in heart failure patients in everyday clinical practice. Thank you very much.
Performing telerehabilitation consists of two stages: an initial stage, conducted either at hospital sites or within outpatient programs, and the basic stage, conducted at home. Telerehabilitation is carried out by a medical team and advanced monitoring systems are used. A telerehabilitation medical team should consist of a physician, a physiotherapist, a nurse, and a psychologist. Currently available monitoring systems include a special remote device for tele-ECG monitored and supervised exercise training, which consists of EHO mini device, blood pressure measuring and weighing machine, glucometer, saturation, and a monitoring center capable of receiving and storing patients' medical data. Specialized hardware and software are necessary. An EHO mini device adjusted to registering fragments of ECG recording from 3 precordial leads and to transmitting the data via mobile phone network to the monitoring center. An EHO mini device contains training sessions pre-programmed individually for each patient, defined exercise duration, breaks, timing of ECG recording. The times of automatic ECG registration are preset and coordinated with the exercise training. The planned training sessions use a device indicating with sound and light signals what the patient should do. The sound signals are in the form of bleeps, and the light signals come from color-emitting diodes. Bleeps and a green diode blinking mean the patient should do exercise. Another set of bleeps and a red diode blinking indicate the end of the exercise. The timing of automatic ECG recordings correspond to peak exercise. The goals of the initial stage are a baseline clinical examination for reliable evaluation of clinical status and functional capacity, individual planning of exercise training depending on patients' exercise efficiency achieved in tests, and performing a few monitored training sessions. Education is a very important issue. Patients and their partners are taught how to operate a telerehabilitation set, how to measure heart rate, blood pressure, body mass, how to self-evaluate worrying symptoms and signs, how to prepare a healthy diet, how to provide first aid in case of an emergency, how to perform an exercise training, how to self-evaluate the level of perceived exertion according to the Borg scale during a training session, how to perform relaxation training and cope with depressive symptoms and anxiety. The basic telerehabilitation stage consists of 2 parts performed prior to each session. The first part, the training consent procedure required to access each training session. The second part, the training session itself. Before each training session, the patient answers a series of questions regarding his present condition via a mobile phone. These should include fatigue, dyspnea, edema, and medications taken. Subsequently, the patient transmits his resting ECG, blood pressure and body mass data to the monitoring center. In the absence of contraindications, patients obtain permission to start the training session. Exercise training is performed in accordance with the guidelines for heart failure patients. 3 different training modalities have been proposed to improve exercise capacity: aerobic endurance training, respiratory muscle training, resistance and strength training. Telerehabilitation set is used to monitor and control training wherever the patient selects to exercise. If the training session is completed uneventfully, the patient transmits ECG recording via a mobile phone to the monitoring center immediately after the end of every training session. We recommend the presence of another person who will accompany the patient during the exercise and will be able to provide first aid and call professional medical help in case of an emergency. The data is stored on a computer and is analyzed by tele-rehabilitation team at the monitoring center, and the safety, efficacy and accuracy of a particular patient rehabilitation program is assessed. Using the data on heart rate during the exercise and the patient's subjective evaluation of the perceived exertion, consultants are able to adjust the training workload appropriately or, if necessary, to discontinue the session. Patients can also transmit an ECG recording at any moment, for example, due to the symptoms like palpitation, chest pain, etc. Telephone contact is also used for psychological support. After completing all home training sessions, the patient undergoes the final medical examinations. We usually observe a significant improvement in the distance in a 6-minute walk test and peak oxygen consumption in cardiopulmonary tests. There are legal regulations relating to telemedicine procedures, and the National Health Fund finances the cardiac hybrid telerehabilitation in Poland. It allows to introduce telerehabilitation to everyday clinical practice.
Well, thank you very much, Eva. This was an excellent presentation, and the video was also excellent, very explanatory. Thank you very, very much. So Eva had some questions for the audience. I will post the poll right away. So our questions towards our colleagues, cardiologists and ITs. What training modalities are recommended for heart failure patients? Or what training modalities do you recommend for the heart failure patients? Is it endurance, aerobic training? Is it strength resistant training? Is it respiratory training? All of the above, or only endurance training? What do you think? So I think our audience is very smart, Eva. They picked the right all of the above. Yes.
Yes. Congratulations for this answer.
Yeah. So thank you very, very much, Eva. If we have any questions from the audience, this would be the perfect time to address them. I would like to ask my friend Adolfo Sparenberg, which is also the Telecardiology Vice Chair, if he has any questions either for Professor Grobbee, either for Eva.
I have a question to Eva. What's the number, considering the strategy of tele-rehabilitation that you showed us through this short movie, what's the total number of people involved in this project? Do you have this? Because I'd like to have an idea of the staff and the number of people that were involved in this kind of project.
This project, Telereh-HF project, we randomize 850 patients in ratio 1:1 to telemonitoring and telemanagement group versus usual care. The telemanagement encompasses telecare, telerehabilitation, and also home monitoring of cardiovascular implantable electronic devices. This is a Tele-HF study, and the results of the study will be available at the end of this year. We are very happy because these results we will present in the European Society of Cardiology Congress in Paris. So you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much.
But in our
Congratulations for
center,
that.
thank you very much. But in our center, we have experience regarding telerehabilitation in heart failure patients. Totally, we perform this kind of rehabilitation for 1,000 heart failure patients so far. So we did it.
Thank you very much. So I would have a question for Professor Grobbee and also for Dr. Piotrowicz. Do you think that sensor development is important in preventive cardiology?
Well, the short answer is yes. I believe it's very important. It allows you to bring the clinic to the patient rather than bringing the patient to the clinic, and that has numerous advantages. It also allows for centralized monitoring of patients at a distance, and the range of sensors that we can utilize is constantly expanding. Of course, there's some that are not quite perfect, and developments are needed. But already examples have been shown. For example, with Apple Watch, which could be seen as a sensor in detecting AFib in very large numbers of patients. Not very perfect, but it works, and if the sensors improve, it will work better.
Thank you, Professor Grobbee. What do you think, Eva? Is there a huge role in sensor development?
Yes, I think that it is very, very important, but I would like to point that telemedicine in cardiology, it is hybrid procedure. It joins the first step in clinic when we evaluate the patients, treat them, and the second step is telemonitoring, telecare, telerehabilitation, home monitoring of implantable devices. So in my feelings, this is a hybrid procedure, especially for chronic patients, for heart failure patients. Now we are started the program with telemedicine for patients with left ventricular assist device. So I think that telemedicine is dedicated for chronic patients, and this procedure should be hybrid, part in hospital or ambulatory, and then home-based telemonitoring, telecare, telerehabilitation.
Thank you, Eva. There is one more question for you, and afterwards one question for Professor Grobbee. So, Eva, do you think what should be the first step to implement a telerehabilitation service?
We have to have external devices, computer with special software, because we have a lot of data, a lot of parameters, and the software allows to manage this data. And of course, telerehabilitated or telecare and staff for performing telerehabilitation. The telerehabilitation team should include physician, physiotherapist, nurse or ECG technician, and psychologist. So we need staff and, of course, equipment.
Yes, dedicated staff and software and equipment. Yeah, this is great. So one more question for Professor Grobbee: is there any use of monitoring by ACG or other sensors on wearables in normal people? What are there any benefits in monitoring normal people, Professor Grobbee?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. In general, I think that in normal people, recording electrocardiograms is a bit risky because we have a hard time understanding what we're seeing in completely healthy individuals, and screening in general with electrocardiograms has not shown to be very useful for risk detection in otherwise healthy subjects. So I doubt whether that would hold true for sensors that monitor electrocardiograms. However, as I said a minute ago, for detecting arrhythmia in apparently healthy elderly subjects, for example, there's a case to be made, and undiagnosed atrial fibrillation obviously has risks that can be mitigated, and therefore detection would be good. But general screening with electrocardiograms, I'm not sure that's very useful.
Yes, I think so. I fully agree with your opinion. So we will further on pass to the next slide. So this is the take-home message from our lovely speakers, which they already presented. I would love to present a small point of view, a personal point of view. But before that, I would like to ask you to vote. What do you think? Do you think that digital cardiac rehabilitation is the future of cardiac rehabilitation? So the answer is pretty straightforward. The majority think that yes, it could be the future. I think that it could be the future, but maybe for special population, maybe for patients which are pretty much stable. For example, patients which have had a myocardial infarction, but their left ventricular ejection fraction is close to normal, or maybe young patients. So there are maybe some subgroups we have to pay attention to. This is especially important in this era where we are targeting lower hospitalization, and we also have to lower the costs, and we also ask to be efficient. This would be just a personal opinion. I would like to know if Dr. Sparenberg has any more questions for the invites.
Not exactly questions, just from my side, if we are ending the session, just a reminder and a message to those that attended today's webinar, because that was really outstanding. We are restarting the ISfTeH webinars in the second semester, probably in September. So please stand by and you receive a communication from the ISfTeH side. On behalf of our society, I thank you, Alexandru, and the very special invited speakers for this excellent webinar. Thank you so much. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Adolfo. So I would also like to thank Dr. Eva Piotrowicz for her excellent presentation. I hope to see her soon. I would also like to thank Professor Grobbee for his excellent point of view and for his participation. I know he's a very, very busy person. Thank you, Professor Grobbee. And this being said, contact us. This webinar will be posted on the website. You can access it afterwards. Maybe it will be posted also on the European Society of Cardiology website. This is to be seen. Thank you very much to all the attendees. Thank you to the speakers. Have a nice evening and have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.